morning. Today is the 4th of March, a beautiful Monday morning to everyone. I hope everyone had a great weekend. Today on the program, we speak to the government of Eswatini through the Ministry of Education, which has entered into an agreement with the French government through the French embassy to Eswatini and Mozambique to send Emaswati secondary school teachers of French and English for a 9-month placement project. Basuka balibhekisa kulela lase-France ngenyanga ya-August to be placed in schools in France where they will help teach English as French. This is in a bid to assist the French to learn English and the Swazi teachers to improve their pedagogical and linguistic competencies in French. This project will go on for the next 5 years and has a possibility of renewal after that period. Teachers are to apply for admission into this program, and applications open from the 5th to the 14th of March 2024. Indzaba-ke lesitayikhulumisa kabanti na Senior Inspector we-French ngaphansi kwelitiko letemfundvo make-ke Annelisa Stoffels. Kanti-ke sitawuphinde sixoxisane naFabrice Msonera kutemidlalo. Kuba nje ukuthi kule mpelasonto lesibuya kuyo imiphumela ibengile njani, ama-log standings sekeme kanjani, nama-fixtures-ke latawulandzela atawubanga kanjani. Sitawuqala lapha ekhaya lapho khona sibonile ukuthi kule mpelasonto i-Young Buffaloes ikhonile-ke kushaya i-Ezulwini United amagoli lamabili ku-0 and have sustained their first position kuma-log standings. Seabirds and Highlanders but draweke 1-1, pushing Highlanders to the 5th position now on the log standings. Swallows is still right there in the race in the top 4 after beating, or rather obliterating, i-Wanderers nga 3-0. Kanti-ke emidlalweni lodlalwe ngemgcibelo i-Green Mamba ikhonile-ke kushaya iMadlenya 5-1. Nanabo continuing to be a threat to Young Buffaloes on the 2nd position of the log standings. Nsingizini Hotspurs ne-Moneni Pirates kubeng 0-0. We'll look at other results labe khona lapha ekhaya, but we just wanted to highlight these very few important ones. La shinja kakhulu even the way ima-log standings, particularly from the top 5 positions. It was also a big weekend in the English Premier League with Eric Ten Hag. A big test against Manchester City. He wasn't able to really impress the Manchester United fans that were, one would say, had unfulfilled ambitions going into this game, because it was clear that they were not going to win. But, you know, as football fans, we tend to get excited and tend to be optimistic with a lot of games. But Manchester City surely got that win that we really expected them to get this weekend. Those are some of the stories. In fact, those are the 2 stories that we will unpack this morning over the next 2 hours before we continue with the program. I guess buke emaphephandaba ekuthenini ngutiphi ihloko lethamba embili. We'll start with the Times of Eswatini. The leading story there, same story, still making headlines even in South Africa, aka murder suspects 4 conditions for extradition. They want to be assured that their safety will be prioritized, and they ask to be escorted by Eswatini police together with their lawyer, handed over to SA prison authorities, not the SAPS. On another story, Begibandla hand over Bokololo or resign if. There's a story that speaks to the members of the Archbishop Begibandla Vilagati-led Red Gown Sect Church who are being seen collecting seawater with containers upon arrival at the Indian Ocean for the church's annual cleansing ceremony over the weekend. On another story, over 4,000 parents have been reported to social welfare. Woman stabs, kills boyfriend, pupil kills herself over school fees. 5 new beautiful clinics riddled with problems. Kutemidlalo Times of Eswatini, making the leading story there. Birds slay sorry Wesleyans in one-sided Yellow Sunday headliner. Capital City Giants fire 3 unanswered goals against strugglers to boost title hopes. Mbabane Swallows exhibited their dominance on the field as they triumphed over a lackluster Manzini Wanderers, securing an emphatic 3-0 victory. On another one, Romero Boli hits out at journalist when Simba SC beat Jwaneng Galaxy 6-0. Jwaneng Galaxy head coach Morena Ramoreboli was left fuming after a journalist accused his side of focusing too much on a clash with security before their CAF Champion League match at Simba SC. Kanzike English Premier League, Phil Foden rescued Manchester City against Manchester United. Sichubekele mbili sibuka Eswatini Observer, the leading story there. Bennett warns government on TLC subvention. He says funding TLC needs to be properly debated and done in transparent manner. On another one, Turkey First Lady hosts in Kosigati. In Kosigati, Lankambule shares a light moment with Turkey First Lady Emine Erdogan at the Antalya Diplomacy Forum during the Peace and Security session. As seen on that photo. Swazi Spa wins liquidator battle. On another leading story there, it's a pupil commits suicide over old fees. A very sad one. Temidlalo, Eswatini Observer, the leading story, title hopes still alive as Swallows soar over Wesleyans. Babane Swallows lewine against Manzini Wanderers score 3-0 have kept their title hopes alive after thrashing Manzini Wanderers on the MTN Premier League match that was played at Mavusa Sports Centre in Osonfo. On another story, Nunu 2000 Malangeni reach Mbabane Swallows dazzling winger Sizolwetu Shabalala's brilliant performance against the Hub Giants. Manzini Wanderers saw him back 2000 Malangeni as prize money after being named man of the match. Eswatini Daily News this Monday morning, the leading story, Turkish International School for Eswatini, according to His Majesty the King, on a story that speaks to His Majesty the King Swati the Third's sentiments in pledging the country's full support for plans to establish a Turkish international school in Eswatini. The school, which is to be established by the Marif Education Foundation, will match the high standards of Waterford Gamhlaba. On another one, World Bank emphasizes economic benefits of gender equality in Eswatini. It's 119 have been nabbed for DD over the weekend. Temidlalo, Buffs back on top. Army side Young Buffaloes is the latest side to assume pole position on the log standings after beating Eswatini United 2-0 at King Sopuza the second stadium. Meanwhile, Mbabane Swallows thrash Wanderers 3-0 at Mavusa Sports Centre to keep their title hopes alive. Thrilling Birds jump to third spot. From the English Premier League, Foden double sinks Manchester United. Those are the leading headlines. Maphepha Olivia Matshatfu sita ubahlola emarket sibuke sibuke ndzaba tesiswati. Sifunza sinemukele ehlelweni sibuke nathi indzaba tesiswati. Ngonyama silwa inkosi Mswati wesithathu ikhusata libandla ukuthi lichubeke lithandazele kuthula nempumelelo yelive laseswatini. Ngonyama iphefumule ngesikhathi imelelwe ngumfana enkosi ihlangabeza enkonzweni yeminyaka yabomake belibandla i-Assemblies of God Back to God Crusade.
Imigodlo bamfa benkosi boba betikhulu tindvuna tembuso bomake nebazalwane belibandla le-Assemblies of God Back to God Crusade bahlangene kalozitha ngelisomvo kubamba inkonzo yeminyaka yabomake baleli bandla labalapha eveni nangaphandle kwelive. Ingwenyama silo inkosi Mswati wesithafu lebeyimelwe ngumfana inkosi ihlangabeza kuleti inkonzo ithi libandla lichubeke lithandazele live laseswatini lihambe ngemlilo wemsunguli waleli bandla Reverend Nicholas Bheki inkosi Bhengu.
Ingwenyama nje ithi angitobonga ukuthi lo mlilo la usho Bhengu awushumayela emkhathini wethu. Nato tonke letishumayelo letivakele namhla. Ukhona lo loqedza ukukhuluma lapha athi asiqapheleni ukuthi noma ngawuwedwa noma ngawuphi uphelele lizulu naliphumile thatha lo mlayetho lowo akudzingeke ukuthi ulandzelwa noma mbuvuwa noma mbe emhlabeni uqaba ngathi unabani imbube emhlaba kambe bazalwane ishito ukuthi angiyibongele kakhulu nemsebenzi wonke namuhla uqhubeke bafundisi balithandazele live uthandazele yonke impumelelo yelive lihlale kahle live ekuthuleni kwalo kambe kuze kuthi ngoba phela sihlethi nje asathi ukuthi Jesu ubuyanini kuyabona sitawuhlala solo sicaphele ukuthi asimali kuthi ubuyanini asikhwesha elinyaweni lwabhwena bayethe
Indvuna yetekuvakasha umhlonishwa Jane Simelane lobekamele indvuna yetasekhaya ihlephule livi ku-Isaiah 61 verse 4.
Inkosi itsite Maswati qinisani faith. Utsite siqiniseni faith ngoba uNkulunkulu utasengela into letinkulu letimangalisako letingaphenyeki. Secondly, ngesensi from radical restoration from Cape to Cairo.
Sihlalo welkomiti labomake baleli bandla Philisiwe Sithebe uthi ngaletinkonzo bakhumbutana bomake inzima yabo ebandleni nasemangweni.
According to the book ya Tito chapter 2 lapho kuthiwa bomake labadzala bahlale phasi bafundise bomakoti utsanza imiti yabo nebantfana babo. So kakhulu itiyagcila nalapho wekuthi sihlala phasi sifundise bomakoti bethu ukuthi baphila njani naboni natala nemadvodza abo babakhulise njani futhi bantfana.
Lihlesheliwe ke livi kulenkonzo bazalwane bakhuthathwa ngaphansi kwesihloko lesithi ligagasi leliletha lushintsho. Kanti umhlonishwa Ndvunankulu ke wanxusa abaholi eveni ukuthi bende siciniseko sekuthi inkolo ikakhulukati leyo yobuKristu iyachubeka iba ngumgogodla eveni nekuthi ingasuswa etikolweni takuleli. Etindzabeni Eswatini TV kubika Samkeliswe khoza nginagiyani Msibi kalozitha.
Indvuna yetemafa umhlonishwa Neil Reichenberg ithi ngokusebenzisana netinhlangothi letahlukene uhulumende utayibuketa ke indzaba yembasha yabogogo nabomkhulu nekulungiswa ke kwetindlu temibutfo lemithathu yelive. Indvuna bekhuluma ngesikhatsi indlu yabayesikhulu idzingidza emaphakelo yelive.
Uhambisana nemgomo wayo iParliament yelive indlu yabayesikhulu ngalesine idzingidze emaphakelo yelive eminyakati imali wa 2024-2025 lapho bahlonishwa endlini bakhuluma ngesimo lesikabi setindlu letihlala emalunga emibutho yetekuvikela eveni netikhebesi kutemphilo kulokunye.
Sibonge indzaba ya 4% yetisebenti takahulumende wekuthi mane bathole bekunene lezi besingakucela nje phela ngoba lo 4% is understand that ukuthi it's overall nase kubukwa ke mane labalele phansi banikwe lokungedudlwana kwalo 4% kuyengekuya ke ukuthi kunjani unganikwa nje 4% wonke umuntu bonakala ukuthi labale phansi banjeyana
ufundo ngifuna nje kubuta endvune temafa lo ukuthi ingabe le budget i-lion share yale budget yelive ibheke ka education ingabe vele babukile kabantu Mr Speaker lo ukuthi vele lobuningi bale mali butayisolve le problem Mr Speaker lele ka education lokumele lapha Mr Speaker angideclare lokuthi lekhaya kaNkosi kunebantu la ngikhuluma ngibashiyile bantfana basemakhaya bekwetikolweni le uyethuka ke nasobona imali lengakaya ka education kanti bantfana bahlele emakhaya kuthi kambe le mali ita influencer indaweni lothu ishintshe le quality le education Mr Speaker.
Akhona lama health facilities But the basic needs, one being bomake nabafuna kuyobeleka bamfana. Ukhanze ukuthi the facilities are there, but those needs are not catered for. Bese make kudzinga ukuthi uhamba over 100 kilometers kuze athole lolo sito. Ngicabanga ukuthi isimo eSwati we consider that as a basic need yabo make.
Indvuna yetemafa umhlonishwa neRickenback unikete timphendvulo endlini.
Security forces' home is very depleted. Honourable Speaker, what we have had a look at, and that is that we need a lot of money in this space. It is true, unfortunately, we don't have the budget room for that. And so what we considering at the moment, Honourable Speaker, and we'll still come to the House with this, is using the Housing Board. In fact, just this week at Cabinet, we actually had big meetings with the Housing Board. They've got about $500 million, which has been approved by the House when it comes to a sovereign government guarantee that they could use, get that housing scheme going again, and then possibly come to the House, even ask for more sovereign guarantee to give the Housing Board to continue with institutional housing rollout. At the moment, it looks expensive, but the reason why it looks expensive is because we are, as government, buying it back in 15 years from the Housing Board, so we're paying the loan in 15 years. It's not a rental, it's a buyback.
Emalunga endlini abesashukumisa kutsi indvuna yetemafa yetfule endlini timphemvulo letibhaliwe. Etindzabeni yeSwatini TV kubika Samkeliswe Khoza nasikhumbuzo Dlamini naBongani Masuku eParliament.
Indvuna yelitiko letinkhundla umhlonishwa Sikhumbuzo Dlamini ukhutsata abahlonishwa ukuthi batikhulume tindzaba letimcoka eParliament bambonise uhulumende. Indvuna ithi ngekungendi njalo kubeka uhulumende ebungodini yekubate inchubekela phambili.
Lilunga leParliament lenkundla kugege Magesi Dlamini libambe inkonzo ekubonga kwethenjwa sive sakugege ngekuthi limelele lenkundla eParliament. Indvuna yelitiko letinkundla nekuthuthukiswa kwato umhlonishwa Sikhumbuzo Dlamini ithi kumgcoka kubonga sive nekuthi umuntu nasakhethiwe angakukhohlwa lokulathunywe kona sive.
Bahlonishwa kufuna ba-understand imandate yabo nemhlonishwa lakhaya naye simnikile nje mandla lokuthi eParliament indzawo lemcoka kakhulu lapho khona kufuna ukuthi ama-issues akhulunyiswe khona kakhulu interrogate lapho khona nangabe le Parliament itela amandla ingambonisi lo hulumende vele unamathuba lamakhulu ukuthi angahamba ayoshayisa vele noma angahamba ayogcumukela vele elithongeni kodwa iParliament nayo isukumile imbukisa uhulumende kubanjiswene kuyasebenzeka iParliament amaswati ayajabula ngeservice delivery nyalo nje sibuka indlela letinye tingasetshenziswa ukuthi vele lemigwaqo lekhuluma ngayingwenyama yenteke vele nakhona emashobeni noma ke ngagege ngebasale ngaphandle lonke lelive sifuna lishintshe kubethe lo mehluko emkhathini wasedolobheni nasemakhaya funa abantu babeka sejabula nje ukuthi bogesi sebakhona sekufuna ke nyalo senza yamanti senza yemigwaqo kukhona nje ihlelo lwentiwabo lapho khona litiko le public works ukuthi uyalibambisana netinkhundla ukuthi kusebenza imigwaqo lemakhaya lenza baye monitoring siyende sikanye kanye ngoba sidla nabo babethi emakhaya bayaboshifa sidla nama councillors le ala tinkhundleni le wena somsento belula vele sasebenza kanjalo itawulunga emigwaqo masinyana.
Lilunga leParliament lenkundla kugege umhlonishwa Magesi Dlamini uthi kumgcoka ukuthi sive siconze ukuthi usimelele sonke naleso lesingamkhethanga
kwethu kunye ukuthi vele ngemphakathi sikhona ukuthi siuhambela asigcini nje lamashobeni lamuhla sitawusuka vele sichubeke siye kuyiwe lemiphakathi leminye sikhona ukuthi sitowati ukukhuluma la sebasithume kona bona ngoba nasitikhulumela ngeke sikhulumele ukungiko.
Litiko letinkhundla licola umgomo lotawuphocelela abakhethwa ukuthi babuyele siveni basibikele ukuthi basebenta njani lapho bathunywa khona. Kuselihlelweni lahulumende ukuthi imigwaqo leyahlukene lapha eveni lelinganiselwa ngetulu kwamakhilomitha lange-40 ifakwe litiyela. Lobika-ke tindzabeni yeSwatini TV nguthando kuhle Mdluli ngisemashobeni South.
Kuyaqala kubhala lihlolo lwenyuvesi yaseSwatini ngemsombuluko. Mabhalane wenyuvesi yaseSwatini Dr. Salebona Simelane ucela abafundi ukuthi batilungiselele.
Mabhalane wenyuvesi yaseSwatini Dr. Salebona Simelane ukhumbuta abafundi benyuvesi lababhala lihlolo ukuthi batilungiselele. Lo hlolo liyachubeka ngemsombuluko.
Singasho nje ke empeleni ngokuthi cha ngekubuka kwethu thina silungele ukuthi luhlolo lichubeke kusetshenzwe kude futhi sicabanga lesibukile ukuthi kungahle kulithikamede ngiloko nje kwathi sabafundi ukuthi abakulungisi bachubeke bakulungiselele bete labo laba who are taking exams on Monday bete vele bato bala ungathi bato wenda lawo ma exams kuya ke liyahamba lihambe liphele nangaphosisi kumhla ka-22 March bete balungele luhlolo balungele ngayo yonke indlela ukuthi batatishile. Number 2 bangedi netindvo lengakamele bete nato kuma examination rooms ngoba kutabe sekuphula umthetho.
Ngakulokunye simelane ucacise indzaba yenyuvesi ligatsha lasembabane lekathe yona-ke ivaliwe kude umfundzi lekubhekeke ukuthi yabonakale ngekhatsi.
Imbabane campus ivaliwe yi-University Senate emva kokuba abafundi bangayi emaklasini bathu betifundvo. Ibese-ke seyavalwa-ke mhla ka-29 February kwathiwa-ke abahambe baye emakhaya. Kuyawuze-ke kube lapho khona i-University Senate idecide ukuthi ngaphindze kuvulwe nini.
Dr. Simelane ucubhudele abafundi ukuthi batadishe batimisele basetawubhala. Etizabeni kubeka Giyani Msibi ngisembabane.
Umqhudelwano wetemasiko ngephansi kwengwenyama cup uchubekele esifundzeni saselibonjeni lokusifundza sekugcina kusukela ke lo mncintiswano waqala esigabeni setifundza. Umqhudelwano waqala evikini eliphelile esifundzeni saseshiselweni waya esifundzeni sakamanzini lokuke kulwemphela sonto bawusesifundzeni sakahoho naselibonjeni.
Umqhudelwano wetemasiko ngaphansi kwengwenyama cup esigabeni setifundza sewufike emaphethelweni kanti wephetha nje wephethele esifundzeni saselibonjeni. Lo mqhudelwano lona wasungulwa ingwenyama kuthuthukisa amasiko elive nekuhlanganisa temidlalo nemasiko. Amacembu etemasiko aqhudelana ngaphansi kwemalangeni lasigidi nengcenye 1.2 million emalangeni. Sive saselibonjeni bamva benkhosi lababukela imango nabo babetukhulu kulesifundza saselibonjeni baphume ngetinkani kutawusekela lo mqhudelwano lebo kade ubanjelwe esiteki. Amacembu elithango esifundzeni saselibonjeni abelishumi timbongi betilishumi nakutsatfu ingada yona beyisikhombisa indlamu beyimfica kani lacobetela kubeka amatsatfu. Labahambe embili timbongini kube ngusenzo Dlamini engadleni kube bakamkhweli endlamini kube basengevini eluthangwini khona kube yinhlane kulacobethelako kube nesikhalo lesimixwe ebandleni lelichuba lomqhudelwano lesesetawubuketwa. Lo mqhudelwano ngaphambi kokuthi ufike esifundzeni saselibonjeni kulemphela sondvo ucale esifundzeni sakahoho ngemgcibelo. Luthango lolungenele lo mncintiswano esifundzeni sakahoho khona belilishumi nesiphohlongo timbongi betisikhombisa emacembu engadla bekalishumi nemfica indlamu yona beyilishumi nakutsatfu lacwebetelako wona bekasihlanu. Labahambe embili-ke kahoho labayocuthelana naletinye tifundza elithangwini kube yidlangeni etimbongini kube ngutebesuthu ingadla kube ngumkhuzeni indlamu umaphalaleni kani kulacobetelako kube ngumkhuzweni. Emajaji kulo mncintiswano ajaja uluthango ngekubuketa tinhlangothi letehlukene letfaka ekhatsi sikhatsi ingoma kuvunula kuhambelana kwemtimba nengoma kanye nalokunye lokuningi. Etimbongini kanye nakulacobetelako khona emajaji abuketa ingcikitsi lwati bugabazi imvunulo nemdlonga kubala lokumbalwa. Engadleni emajaji ajaja ngekubuketa imfengwane lunyawo tandla nemandla. Endlamini khona bekabuketa sicubulo bugabazi bemholi kuwa nekuvalwa kwengoma nakulokunye lokuningi. Bonke labahambe embili kuletigodzi letine telive sebayawucuthelana enkhundleni yesive kasemhlolo ngelilanga lelitawubusiswa silo semhlaba. Etindzabeni kubika Pholile Maziya esiteki.
Umphathi wenkampani yahulumende lebukete science nekucubungula avumile Dlamini ukuthi ligumbi lekucubungula lelisenokwane i-biotechnology park litawulisita kakhulu ke live kuthuthukisa tinhlangothi letahlukene temnotfo kufaka ekhatsi tekukhicita kanye netemfundvo. Dlamini bekakhuluma ngesikhatsi yachaza ngetinhlelo tetebuchwephesha.
Tonight fule maphakelo imfuna yetemafa umhlonishwa neRickenberg uvete ukuthi tekwatisa tekuchumana netebuchwephesha tingafaka sandla lesibande ekuthuthukiseni umnotho welive. Sicocisane nemphathi wenkampani yahulumende lebukete science nekucubungula iRoyal Science and Technology Park Vumile Dlamini kuva imisebenzi yale nkampani ekuqinisekisa ukuthi uhulumende uyakhona ukuthuthukisa tebuchwephesha kuleli.
Njalo ayisungula umlisi idlala inzima lenkulu ekuthuthukeni umnotho. Njengalo ngathi nje umhlaba wonke namuhla sewulidwa i-technology nathi-ke selivela kangwane siyathokota kusesinayo dotakhiwo letibonakala ukuthi tisimiso lesitawukhona kufula umnotho eSwatini. Ungilamhlanje nawe ubona ukuthi nanje budget beyikhona beyikhuluma ngako lokho ukuthi inaba bobiotech parks siyibona le budget kuhulumende ukuvetile kubonakala ukuthi nayo yawafaka imali kubeni sikhona ekucetha la le biotech park ngoma nayo ingilenye ingcingo ledlala ligciza lelikhulu ekuthuthukeni umnotho. Kunema laboratories lapha lokhanza production siwasebenzise kakhulu nje sikhuluma nge-network yelivela kangwane kungiyalo nje amahhovisi ahulumende lena le sithina nasithatha science technology park ukuze sikhona ukugciza le team sakhanza silokhu nyeni ukufika nale technology beyikhona bekayisebenza uhulumende itolo ayisasiki ukusengamela lesimo lesinyalo ngoba le traffic lesibayisebenzisa nje manje ndawubekisa ukuthi inkundla nje sithi sebenzisa ukuthiwa ngesilumbi voice over IP document management onke amahhovisi elivela kangwane ukhuluma decentralization le indigenous knowledge lekhona la veni kangwane yalo nje sikhuluma ukuthi kunabomagano kunetihlahla kunemihlabelo lama laboratories etawusita ukuthi ke bese le nto sesiyathi commercialize lento sitabe standard kama laboratory lechamana namaswati lesinato.
Lobukete kuchumana kule nkampani Senzo Malaza ukhuthathe kutimbandzakanya ngobamfula basha kute science netebuchwephesha netekucubungula.
Lama laboratories atawuba sita nabo basachamka nemicondvo yabo lekhariphile babuye bende licwaningo kuloko labafuna ukukhicita. Lokungabe sekuholela nasekutheni njengoba siphindze sibe special economic zone bangakhona kumbe nekupartnerisha netinkampani letibonsonto nzima letichamuka ngephandle letingaba kumbe tichamuka ku-pharmaceutical industry, agro-processing nakuletinye nje letingaba khona. Lokho kutawenta ukuthi sikhone ukuthi insha yelive leSwatini ifake isandla lesibonakalako ekuthuthukiseni umnotho.
Kumaphakela alonyaka litiko letekwatisa liphakelwe imali lengu-50 million emalangeni yekucedzela sakhiwo salenkampani sekucubungula lesenokwane iBiotechnology Park. Etindzabeni Eswatini TV kubika samukaliswe khoza nginaGiyani Msibi enokwane.
Lisekela la meya wakaManzini Wesley Dlamini lithi kuthuthukisa lidolobha lakaManzini kutawudzinga ukuthi masipala abambisane netakhamiti kusenjetwe luhlaka lwetekuthuthukisa ke lelidolobha lwe-Integrated Development Plan lelibuke kuletsa tinhlelo tekuthuthukisa wona emadolobha. Dlamini ukusho lokhu ngesikhathi masipala abambe umhlangano netakhamiti tase-Ward 6 kaManzini lapho khona letakhamiti betichazela masipala ngentuthuko netinhlelo labafise kutibona edolobheni.
Masipala wakaManzini utimisele kwelekelela hulumende welive lakangwane ekuthuthukiseni emadolobha netindzawo letsemadolobheni. Masipala wakaManzini abekadze ahlanganise takhamuti tase-Ward 6 kutawuva-ke imivo yabo ekuthenini lokhu kusakhiwa luhlaka lwe-IDP lelibukeke iminyaka lesithupha kusuka eminyakeni wa-2024 kuya eminyakeni wa-2029 ekuthuthukiseni lona-ke lidolobha lakaManzini. Masipala ke ufuna kuva kabandi kito letakhamuti ukuthi engabe masipala ngutiphi tinyathelo langatitsatsa ekuthuthukiseni lelidolobha. Letakhamuti ke tisabeka ke imuvo yabo kuvakele ukuthi insha ayinikedwe emathuba kude ke itawukhona nayo ukutiphilisa. Letinye takhamuti tivetile kwekuthi kuyadzingeka kube nendzawo lapha eWard 6 yebantfwana ukuthi bakhone kudlala ngoba batikhanza ke sebadlala emigwacweni lokuyingoti nakibo. Sikhulumisene ke na Chancellor Wesley Dlamini lolisekela la meya wakaManzini uyachaza ke ukuthi lo msebenzi uhamba kanjani.
We are one of ilowati lelithatha 100% which is need to be ekusitakala sikavarishe ke lapha nalapha. I think from there itinto letifana nabo recreational lesingathi tsinza nibebete nalamanye ama-ideas of ukuthi timakethe bangenta njani bantfu ukuthi bakhone kuthola tindzawo leti timakethe letingaba khona and exploit ama-opportunities cause nje just a stone throw away la kunamavuso. As we speak yesterday bekunetinkonzo lawo ma-opportunities lekufanele nga-exploitwa ngilo leli ward leli litawusita le youth in terms of ukuthi ibalekele nalamanye ama-activities lakufanele ngabe abapartake kiyo.
Masipala wakaManzini usatawuchubekela-ke nakuletinye tindzawo kufaka ekhatsi bo-Ward 7 nabo-Ward 8 bagcine-ke baticedzile tonke letindzawo talapha kaManzini kutawutfola sithombe lesibanti ekuthenini letakhamuti talapha kaManzini tifise kutsi masipala atsatse tiphi tinyatselo ekutfutfukiseni leli dolobha. Etindzabeni kubika Phukuhle Dlamini ikaManzini.
Inhlangano ilikusasa letfu ihlanganise abantu labasha kumathapha lapho bafundziswe khona ukuthi bangafinyelela njani etimalini kuti bathuthukise timphilo tabo ngemabhizinisi.
Ngenhloso yokuqinisekisa ukuthi abantu labasha bayasitakala ngemaphupho labanawo ekucala nekuchuba emabhizinisi abo, inhlangano ilikusasa lethu ihlanganise abantu labasha ukuthi basitakale ngekufinyelela etimalini tekuthuthukisa emabhizinisi abo nekuwacala. Sethu Dlamini wayo lenhlangano uthi bafisa kusita abantu labasha ukuthi bacale emabhizinisi batiphilise.
Sita abantu labasha ukuthi bathole ama-skills ama-resources abatawadzinga ukuthi bathuthukise amabhizinisi abo. So sinema-workshop every first Saturday wenyanga. Sihlanganisa abantu labasha, siletha abochwephesha ama-different organizations babakhulumise ukuthi ama-business plan, ma-product development, loka naloka ukuthi bathuthukise amabhizinisi abo.
Kanti abantu labasha bebayingxenye yaletifundo bathi basitakele impela.
Siye singathi ukuthi sibantu labasha siwathola kuphi lama fundings. So imihlangano le kanjena isita kakhulu ngaloko ukuthi on top of lama fundings siphinze ema products ethu sikhone kuwenda kanjani ukuthi bampu bawadi and
lokuhle nga youth fund ukuthi uyakhona lokuthi noma ngabe kuthiwa usangumuntu osasemncane ngokwebusiness uyakhona ukuthi akunikeze lawo ma funding mhlambe ngaleyo mali la khona ukuthi akufande ngayo ukhona ukuthi uqhubeke nebusiness yakho.
Le nhlangano ke beyimeme baka Setkhona baka Youth Fund kutofundzisa abantu labasha ukuthi bafinyelela njani etimalini. Etindzabeni ngeMgiyani Msibi kumathapha.
Sibhedlela se-Look Commission sicela wonke eMaswati lanenkinga yemathambo ukuthi bavele kulesibhedlela esukwini-ke lalomuhla kungumsombuluko mhla 13 kulenyanga lesetulu nangalwesibili mhla 5 kude-ke batocilongwa. Umphathi walesibhedlela embikweni lothunyelelwe betindzaba uchazile ukuthi banesikhala egumbini labo lapho bacwaninga khona labanenkinga yemathambo. Uthina labatshelwa ukuthi badzinga i-hip replacement nabo abafike ngisho nalabatsinga-ke ukuthi balungiswe emathambo abo nabo abangasali. Kutemidlalo mabhalane wenhlangano lengamele umdlalo welibhola lemphebedo kuleli nqaba mkhaliphi uthi umchutselwano webadlali labadzala latiwa-ke nge-SBS Senior Tournament weminyaka wa 2024 tawubasita abayinhlangano kulungiselela umchutselwano lotawuba ngenyanga yamabasa embombela eNingizimu Afrika. Mkhaliphi bekakhuluma uma kuchubeka umchutselwano we-SBS Senior Tournament enyuvesi yeWaluseni.
Kulempelasonto inhlangano lengamele umdlalo welibhola lemphebedo lapha ekhaya beyibambe umchutselwano lowatiwa ngale-SBS Tournament weminyaka 2024 longenelwa abadlali lesebabadzala balomdlalo lapho khona labaungenele bangama-28. Mabhalano enhlangano emidlalo wetennis lapha ekhaya nqaba mkhaliphi uyachaza ukuthi lo mchutselwano ungasebenziswa yini njengelithikithi likuyongenela imchutselwano yangaphandle kwakuleli.
Yes, sisengake fiki lapho besisakubuka lokho ngoba labanye balabadlali vele bakhaliphile. Kodwa sibukelenye i-open letawuba lapha eNesprit ngaMay la sitawubona khona ukuthi ngabe labadlali bethu bema-seniors ngababambisa kanjani kangakanani ekuthini bambe bawukhompyutha eNesprit ngalo May. So ngicabanga ukuthi le midlalo lena utabasita kakhulu ikakhulu labo labataba top 4 ngibo kanye lesitawutama ukuthi sibabambise ukuthi bambe bayokhompyutha kule open letabe lapha eNesprit.
Kulomnyaka wa 2023-2024 libhange le-Building Society belisekelele inhlangano ngemali engetulu kwa 200,000 kude likhona ukudlalisa lo mchutselwano. Lobikela umsakade Eswatini TV temidlalo ngilinda Dlamini eMbabane.
Iqembu leManzini Wanderers liphindze lakhala phansi emidlalweni ye-MTN Premier League kuMbabane Swallows ngamagoli amathathu ecanzeni emidlalweni odlalelwe enkundleni yasemavuso kaManzini. Kanti-ke iMbabane Highlanders yona idlale ngekulingana neManzini Seabirds ngeligoli kulinye.
Indvoti yangichubeka nekungayihambeli-ke kahle iqembu leManzini Wanderers ngaphasi kwe-MTN Premier League kulandzela kukhala phasi kuMbabane Swallows ngamagoli amathathu ecanzeni. Kulo mdlalo esigabeni sekuqala iMbabane Swallows ithole iligoli kuqala lelishaya Orion Samba kwaye ekhefini hamba imbili iMbabane Swallows ngeligoli linye ecanzeni. Esigabeni sesibili ichubekela igcina khona yona iMbabane Swallows nayithola iligoli lesibili lelishaya Nsizulwethu Shabalala. Asekusele umzuzu munye ukuthi umdlalo uphele iMbabane Swallows itfolile lesithathu lelishaya nguSiyabonga Zwane waphela umdlalo inqobile iMbabane Swallows ngamagoli amathathu ecanzeni. iManzini Wanderers kunginyalo solo inemaphuzu la13 kanti iMbabane Swallows yona inemaphuzu la34. Kanti emidlalweni wokuqala lodlaliwe khona emavuso iManzini Seabirds beyitholane neMbabane Highlanders. Sigaba sekuqala somdlalo siphele ngelicandza ecanzeni kanti esigabeni sesibili iManzini Seabirds ngiyo lithola iligoli kuqala lelishaya Joseph Kiponge. iMbabane Highlanders ayikaphothisa Maseko njengoba litholile lekulinganisa lomdlalo lelishaya uMelusi Magagula. Kubebeteke iqembu lelithola iligoli lekunqoba lomdlalo waphela abambene ngeligoli linye kulinye. Lebikela umsakathi Eswatini TV temidlalo ngilinda Dlamini anaphathizwe Msibi emavuso.
Tingako tindzaba Siswati sitawuba hlala market nasibuya sicocisana na Senior Inspector waka French ngephasi kwelitiko letemfundo Annelisa Stoffels.
If you have recovered from COVID but still have some symptoms, could that be long COVID? How long do these symptoms last? Is there treatment available? Here to talk about long COVID today is Dr. Jamie Rylance. Welcome, Jamie. Jamie, talk to us about long COVID. How does it affect people?
Yeah, thanks, Visme. It's a pleasure to be here. So long COVID can happen to anybody after their acute illness. It can come on as a continuation of symptoms or new symptoms, and it can last a long time. The problem is the symptoms are very variable. Patients may have difficulty recognising that they have it, and healthcare workers, to be honest, can also struggle to identify it. But if you're a typical long COVID patient, you might have fatigue, feeling tired all the time, brain fog, difficulty concentrating, difficulty sleeping, shortness of breath. Those are the main symptoms, but there's so many others. One of the problems is that those symptoms can also represent other medical illnesses. So it's really important to get the diagnosis right, and healthcare workers and patients need to work together to do that. So when scientists have looked for what are the underlying causes of long COVID, there's many different abnormalities that have been seen. Things like very small blood clots or altered immune cell responses, abnormal triggering and responses within the nervous system, or changes in the usual bugs, the microbiome that we usually carry around with us. And that being so many different possibilities, there's no single one diagnostic test. That said, we need to get patients onto treatment. We focus on the things that are bothering them, the symptoms, and making sure their function comes back to normal.
Jamie, do people experience long COVID differently? Are symptoms different, and why?
Well, the obvious thing is no two people are the same, and it can be very different. That said, we do know some things that might predict whether you're more at risk of having long COVID or for how long the symptoms might last for.
Jamie, talk to us about vaccination.
So vaccination does help. It protects you against severe COVID disease, and it protects you against long COVID. At the other end of the spectrum, people who've had particularly severe disease are more likely to have long COVID, and the symptoms are likely to last longer. And that's people who have been admitted to hospital, or particularly to the intensive care unit. But we know that the health of people before COVID is really important as well. So long-standing or pre-existing health problems, respiratory disease, mental health problems, but many others can increase the risk that you suffer long COVID. And therefore, it's really important to try and keep and maintain a healthy lifestyle as much as possible. So we know that long COVID is a global problem. It can occur to anyone, anywhere in the world. What we need is for primary healthcare professionals to be able to recognise, assess and treat patients with long COVID. And the way people access their healthcare will vary around the world. Sometimes there may be specialty services for COVID, sometimes there may be specialist doctors. But very frequently, and particularly where resources are limited, there are not. And so it's really important that we empower primary healthcare providers to give patient-centred care close to home. And that's what we're doing at WHO. making guidance to help healthcare workers deliver high quality care and educational materials to support them to do so.
So, Jamie, how long do the symptoms last? And even though we don't have a pill per se, how can we help people who are suffering from long COVID?
Well, the first thing is that most people recover fully, and that can take months. And of course, some people we know are badly affected for years. Although there isn't a specific medical treatment, what we really need to do is assess and treat patients for the problems that they have. Often that's associated with rehabilitation, getting people back to functional status to enjoy life and health. There are specific medical treatments for some people, and overall that goes a long way to helping increase quality of life. So I'm optimistic in the science delivering more treatments, and that's hundreds of clinical trials going on at present, and I'd encourage people to get involved where they feel able and where they're offered. So there's hope, I think, in terms of new treatments. But apart from the medical treatment, I think the biggest obstacle that people with long COVID feel at the moment is that their disease is not recognised. They're told that their brain fog or other symptoms are not real, and that's demoralising. So what they need is kindness and support through their treatment, and that comes from their family, their friends, their employers, because it's in everyone's best interests that people with long COVID don't feel alone and feel that they're supported throughout their recovery.
Thank you, Jamie. That was Science in 5 today. Until next time, then, stay safe, stay healthy, and stick with science.
When you choose your adventures, you do so with an open heart and a desire for the unexpected. You embark on journeys to discover new worlds, full of wonder. You choose a path to awaken your senses, to feel the rush of life overwhelm you, a world to make you look up and realize just how inspiring this life can be. You ask, and we give you the royal experience. Arrive and awaken your heart. Explore life in ways only thought possible in your dreams. There are but a few places on earth so special, so unique, and so spectacular, where it becomes the rite of passage for the ambitious travelers, the courageous souls, to all have the one and only royal experience. That day when you look deep into your heart and leap into an ancient world so very different from your own, where magic, beauty, and love are shared forever, then you will have a royal experience. There is just one place on earth where the people make you feel a part of their kingdom, where you just might volunteer to awaken spirits, enrich minds, and work alongside communities to build, motivate, and inspire. This is truly the royal experience. When you dream of a different world, beyond the ordinary, beyond time, discover just how far you'll go to expand your understanding of life's greatest mysteries. There's just one place on this planet with so much to offer. Now is the time for you to have the royal experience.
Did you know that where you live, the food systems around you, your opportunities to be active, all of this has an impact on your risk of developing obesity? How big is this issue? How can you reduce your risk of developing obesity and protect yourself? And how would you know if you're living with obesity? Hello and welcome to Science in 5. I'm Vismita Gupta-Smith. We are talking to Dr. Francesco Branca today. Francesco, talk to us about obesity.
Obesity is a chronic disease defined by excess fat deposits that impair health. It can lead to type 2 diabetes, heart disease. It may affect bone health, reproduction. It is associated to certain cancers, and it affects the quality of living. And you get obesity because of the consumption of unhealthy diet, because of low physical activity, but also because of poor sleeping pattern and stressful life. Some people are genetically predisposed to obesity, and so it's easier for them to get obese, but also obesity can be the result of using certain medications. Many people live in environments that are conducive to obesity because of foods which are high energy, that are available around the clock, that are cheap.
So, Francesco, how big is this problem of obesity?
Obesity is a problem for health and for economic development. We calculate that 5 million deaths every year are caused by the consequences of obesity, and countries lose up to 3% of their gross domestic product because of obesity.
How would one know if they live with obesity, and how can they manage their condition?
To identify obesity, you would measure weight and height and calculate the body mass index. In adults, the body mass index higher than 30 kilogram per square meters helps the diagnosis of obesity. You can also measure waist circumference. In women, a waist circumference over 80 centimeters and in men over 90 centimeters indicates a high risk of the consequences of obesity. You will also see that with obesity, there's a high blood pressure. There are disorders of the blood lipids and of glycemic control. The response to this is that obesity is not your own responsibility. You shouldn't be ashamed if you're living with obesity. And people should not blame people living with obesity. Then the most important thing is to go to see a health practitioner who also should be professional and respectful for the people living with obesity, should help the diagnosis and should help with an integrated response, which is providing counseling on diet and physical activity, and as needed, suggesting drug treatment or even some surgical practices that would limit the consumption and the absorption of food.
What if I do not have access to healthy food or do not have access to or easy access to exercises? How can I prevent obesity and protect myself?
Community and national policies should help everybody to have access to healthy lifestyles. I would like to give some tips for everybody. If you're an adult, choose whole grains, fruit and vegetable, healthy fats, and limit sugars. Prefer water to any other drinks. Be active. If you're a mother of a young infant, breastfeed her or him as long as you can. Then for older children, give water and not sugar-sweetened beverages, fruit and vegetables instead of confectionery, walk to school, limit screen time, and make sure that adequate sleep is given.
Thank you, Francesco. That was Science in 5 today. Until next time, then, stay safe, stay healthy, and stick with science.
welcome back to the program. The government of Eswatini, through the Ministry of Education, bangeneleke isivumelwano ne-French government indzaba lenkhulu indzaba kwekuthi kufuna ukuthi bothishela labakhona la kangwane labafundzele yona i-French batawutfola ematfuba ekuyawusebenta eveni lase-French. But let's have this conversation in detail with Senior French Inspector from the Ministry of Education, Annelisa Stoffels. Annelisa, welcome to the program. Quite an interesting development, especially happening because we just heard last week a report from UNESCO explaining there is a global shortage of teachers, particularly language teachers emhlabeni wonke jikelele. Ngitsine la kangwane mangitibukela nje tinombolo lesinato cishe kungathi we do have an influx of teachers. Could this be an opportunity for Eswatini to really leverage the space lesikhona nyalo emhlabeni wonke jikelele kutsenini kungathi kune shortage yabo teacher? I mean, now sisabona na development that has happened between Eswatini and the French government. Perhaps now nje usatasichazela kabanti ngayo le agreement lena. Could we really leverage this current problem that the world faces?
Thank you very much, Sfiso. I'd like to, a very good morning to you and to the viewers of Kusile Breakfast Show. I think so kushidovele kuti there is a shortage of teachers, and particularly because France, for the longest of time, we all know they hardly speak English. Most of them are just French speakers, and you find it very difficult for any Liswati that has been to France. They will agree with me, because the moment they touch base at the airport, they hardly hear a word of English. So I think this is one of the reasons that has caused the French government to want now to introduce English even in their school system. And obviously they will need to work with partners, especially countries that are English speaking. And Eswatini happens to be one of those countries. Let's say France has entered into an agreement with the Eswatini government through the Ministry of Education and Training to send our Emaswati teachers to France for a placement program where they will teach English. But also, not only is it just benefiting the French government, but it is benefiting us as an Eswatini, because we teach French as a foreign language in Eswatini, and we wish for our teachers to be very competent in the delivery of French in the schools in the ministry. Probably I could stop there for now.
And perhaps as we look at how it also benefits Eswatini, yes, I really agree with you, and Zabeni Weguti, they have to be competent, and how this opportunity really helps them. Kulolo hlangothi engabe kusita kangakanani kenyalo kuna insaya lenkhulu kakhulu lelive vele libalile, even on the budget speech as well as the speech from the throne. Nakuthiwa we have the most pressing challenges. Kuthiwa the two most pressing and urgent challenges livela kangwane lelibhekene nawo, it's poverty and unemployment. And here comes this opportunity now. Let's ngasho ukuthi it is an employment opportunity for Emaswati, and possibly even now ufuna kuyibuka from a deeper lens, uyabona lo ukuthi nakubo foreign exchange perspective labo labayawusebenta lena batawukhona kakhulu kusita imindeni yabo ekuthenini kube khona labakubekako etafuleni. Engabe sikwethabela kangakanani? How happy are we ehlangothini lwaka employment creation?
Siyakujabulela kakhulu thina as a country, because nasihambisa labo thishela bethu, because this program, Sfiso, let me highlight, is open for teachers that are already in the system, that are teaching French in secondary schools, that will then go to France for a period of 9 months, where they will be placed in schools there. But whilst they are there, obviously, so we will then be able to then hire relief teachers that will hold the fort whilst these others are in France within the 9-month period. And this is not just a once-off, because it's a program that will run for the next 5 years, which means we'll be able to keep sending Emaswati teachers to France. And as they are there, when they get relief, because the others that will be employed to take the place of those. And when they come back, they'll be able to then share their skills with our counterparts, also within the language speaking fraternity, that is English and French, so that the skills are not just kept within them, they are spread across. Because remember, Sfiso Guti, one of the the SDG goal that is strictly linked to education, SDG goal number 4, speaks to quality education. So it means that as Silive, the learners that we produce are learners that are able to compete even globally for opportunities that are available, whether for study or for business and any other. So if we strengthen the language competency in French, we'll ensure memorandum of understanding that the country has with Morocco, where we are sending our youth to go and study.
Unfortunately, we are losing a bit of connection there with Annalisa Stoffels, but njengoba sasichazela indzawo yokuthi eMaswati atawusitakala kangakanani kule opportunity lena, but I think sesiphindze sinaye sawubuyile emoyeni. Annalisa, maybe on another question, I think we had gotten the gist of the question that you were answering and the answer that you were providing to us. We heard Finance Minister Neil Reichenbach akhulumisa indzaba lenkulu ekuthenini on the last financial year, government converted about 794 teachers from temporary to permanent and pensionable. Umuntu-ke uyatibuta, in the backdrop of this development, ukuthi engabe bangaki bothishela kuma-languages, particularly kube French, labakhona ukuthi baconverteke, and ngiyabuka lokho ukuthi bangaki-ke beba-unemployed la sebatawutfola ematfuba nyalo ukuthi bacashe. Engabe ungasipha yini isithombe as a senior, French inspector ekuthenini le nombolo vele yabo bothishela laba-graduate-ako bamele-ke kuyawusebenza nyalo kulolu hlangothi lwaka-French, itsini leyo nombolo leyo nokuthi batawusitakala kangakanani, with this development?
Thank you very much. So I think because for the longest of time, we've had expatriates coming in to help us fully fill the other French because we didn't have locals that would teach the language. So through a program that was initiated by the ministry, that are locally produced teachers from our local institutions, William Pitcher College. And I think as of now, because I think the first cohort that graduated did so in the year 2020/2021, and all of them were able to be consumed. And I think we have about 20 teachers now, labama locals, lesebaqashiwe, labasebendago as we speak currently. And I think we also have those that have graduated but have not been employed yet. There's about 6 of them. These ones will get the opportunity to be hired because they will then take the places of these that would have gone to France within the period of 9 months.
Okay, gepakhamba bangaki?
For now, we don't want to chew more than we can swallow. We will see between 3 to 5 teachers that we are sending now. And then we can learn from there. And obviously the numbers will keep increasing every single year once we have the hang of it. But if we send at least about 5 of them this year, then we'll be able to increase the number. Depending also, because remember there's budgetary constraints that are attached to this as well, because we need to be sending them and making sure we'll sorted before they can then get their stipend and get settled in France.
Right. Because I'm doing my maths as usasholeti nombolo from the 26 lesson etile now by nombolo lesnabo lakhaya locally start khona ukuthi sisale nalabang 21, and I suppose lokho kusiniketa an opportunity, and this I'll give you this opportunity ukuthi when a call to eMaswati ekuthenini ayifunzele French, because there's opportunities are now opening up with the world, reporting that there is a shortage of language teachers globally.
It is very important, but before Infolesi advocate is to say bamfana baqale bafunze ulwimi lwabo uyangiva ngikhuluma ngeSiswati. So before we can start talking other foreign languages, abaqale ngefunza ulwimi lwabo bese sithi by extension we then need to then learn other languages because the world has become a global community. So for us to be able to then seize these opportunities that are availed outside there, we need to be able nathi silive ukuthi siwakhulume lama languages lata sithatha and export us as a country, whether you're looking at it from a business perspective or you're looking at it from education, from travel, tourism, whatever sector that you are looking at it from, it's important for us to learn these languages, especially because French, as we know, is the second most widely spoken language emhlabeni. So it's important for us, especially because we even have partnerships, where you talk SADC, you talk AU, you talk UN. French is a language or an official language that is used in this platform. So it will give us leverage as a country to be able to partake fully and effectively in these organizations and in this global community. Maybe learning there's a call for applications because we want this process to be fair and transparent. Umzala wami lese ngimfaka kule program. But what's going to happen is we have opened up for all Emaswati to actually apply for this opportunity. And what they can do, will probably share, there's a link that they have to go through so that they apply, and a selection process, obviously, that will be involved so that the deserving candidates are the ones that we send to France. And for more information, probably for those that are interested, they need to call the number 2404-3667. I'll repeat the number again, 2404-3667. Alternatively, they can email assistant.eswatini@gmail.com. I'll say that again. They email assistant.eswatini@gmail.com.
Annalisa, thank you so much for your time. You know, as you are speaking, I'm on my phone, I'm Googling the minimum wage. Yes, France, and my price that the stipend that they would get is along loyo 1,500 euros, low minimum wage, corner France. Because if you do your math there, we are told we could see that amount could equal to 31,000 emalangeni, and I think nabakhona kusenda lokho lokuncane ekhaya basasebenta lena with that minimum wage bakhona mbamba kusupporta emakhaya kubo.
Liqiniso lelo Sifiso, because it's an opportunity to save as well, because njengoba you've rightly said it, because they will be receiving, it's a showcase, they will be receiving a stipend every single month. And will be able, yes, to secure their needs whilst they're in France, and probably also send money at home, like you are saying.
Thank you so much for your time, Annalisa. Annalisa Gestoffel, she's the Senior Inspector French under the Ministry of Education, just talking to us about this very exciting agreement that Eswatini has with the French government to send some of our local French teachers to France. Giyobambisa ke live lase France kufundzisa i-French. Kanti-ke sewavetile ama-benefits nelive lakangwane lelitawusitakala ngawe kakhulu kulabo bothisha labatawe kuyofundisa live lakangwane lisebhekene nayo inside ye-unemployment, particularly under the teaching sector. And look kwendeka, we just saw His Majesty the King in Turkey. Nakhona ufike waba nawo ke bilateral conversations to increase cooperations between the two countries, Turkey and Eswatini. Le nakhona kuthiwe kufuna kwakheke amathuba emisebenzi latawusita eMaswati. Kusithakasisa kakhulu futhi siyakwethabela ke kubona intuthuko lefana nalena iba ngilekhona. Sibahlo lethi makethe sitawubuya netindzaba tesingisi.
Ujala masada mahle kunathi lesa.
Sabatandi ukuthi njengalokho sifile sive sitikhulumi.
Be sure to catch Business Watch every Wednesday between 2 p.m. to 3 p.m., where we feature the latest updates on business news, market trends, and exclusive interviews with industry leaders, as well as insights on emerging small and medium enterprises in the commercial sector. Business Watch, your business leader.
Five minutes after 7, we'll look at international news. The United States on Saturday carried out the first of what it said would be a series of humanitarian airdrops of food into Gaza as aid agencies warned of a growing humanitarian disaster in the Palestinian enclave. The White House has said the airdrops would be a sustained effort and that Israel supports them, but critics say airdrops are far less effective than aid deliveries by truck, and that is nearly impossible to ensure supplies do not end up with militants.
Over the skies of southwest Gaza, parachutes float down from a fleet of cargo planes, a joint effort by the US military and the Jordanian Air Force to drop aid containing some 38,000 meals along the enclave's coastline.
This is the aid they're dropping. It's better to send aid via ground deliveries than airdropping by parachutes. These airdrops are not enough for one family. This is nothing.
Like many on the ground who deem it insufficient, critics of the operation say it's only a drop in the bucket for the massive needs in the enclave, with aid organizations slamming the move as inefficient and largely symbolic. The UN says more than 500,000 people in Gaza, a quarter of the territory's population, are just a step away from famine, with children already dying of starvation.
People are so desperate for food, for fresh water, for any supplies, that they risk their lives in getting any food, any supplies to support their children, to support themselves.
The move from Washington comes after more than 100 Palestinians were killed on Thursday as they scrambled for aid. Local authorities blame the IDF for firing on crowds, while Israel insists many of the dead were trampled. The desperation of starving Gazans has only been growing since Israel barred the entry of food, water, medicine and other supplies into the territory, except for a trickle of aid entering through the southern border with Egypt.
Germany admits to leaked details of a military meeting outlining future munitions and battle plans for Ukraine. Russia calls Germany its age-old rival, that is again its sworn enemy. Viewer discretion is advised on the following story.
At least 10 people died in a Russian drone strike on an apartment block in Ukraine's southern port city of Odessa. Rescuers raced to cut concrete, combing for casualties trapped in the rubble. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said the drone was an Iranian-made Shahed kamikaze, one of thousands supplied to Russia throughout the war. Ukraine, heavily reliant on Western effort, has long asked for weapons with greater range to strike Russian targets from afar. And so, when news broke late last week of German plans to equip Ukraine with the Taurus cruise missile capable of flying about twice as far as missiles supplied by Britain and France, Russian officials were quick to blame the West for its ongoing invasion of Ukraine. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov described a strong war camp in Europe bent on delivering a strategic defeat to Russia in the battlefield. He also bashed Finland and Sweden's recent membership in NATO. News of the Taurus missile first broke through what appears to be leaked audio of a video call where German officers discussed arming Ukraine with hardware and possible targets like the bridge linking Russia to illegally annexed Crimea. On a recent visit to Vatican City, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz called the potential leak a very serious matter that will be investigated very carefully, very intensively, and very quickly. Meanwhile, civilian targets like schools and building blocks remain very much in the Kremlin's crosshairs as Moscow's missiles tear entire neighborhoods apart. And as Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine now grinds into a third year, mourners buried the loudest voice opposing the government of Russian President Vladimir Putin. Chanting his name, thousands said goodbye to Alexei Navalny after his still mysterious death in a penal colony weeks ago. Independent Russian media and human rights group OVD Info reporting around 70 detentions nationwide, despite relative quiet before the cameras in Moscow.
Under a heavy police presence, thousands of supporters of Alexei Navalny bid farewell to the prominent Russian opposition leader outside his funeral Friday in Moscow.
Alexei Navalny's parents held hands as a priest administered funeral rites over the body of their 47-year-old son Friday. Barricades and a heavy police presence surrounded the Moscow church. Only family members and close friends of the opposition leader were allowed in the church and later a nearby cemetery for his burial. But outside, a large crowd of Navalny's supporters defied authorities and risked arrest to pay their last respects, clapping and chanting "No to war," "Navalny," and "Putin is a murderer." Pallbearers carried Navalny's coffin from the church, and a large crowd of mourners walked from the church to the cemetery, chanting "Free political prisoners." Thousands of supporters, and possibly tens of thousands, turned out despite the risk of arrest and repercussions. One expert told VOA she was amazed at the size of the crowd.
People lining up for kilometers along the road to the cemetery where he is being buried. And so these people are risking imprisonment to go out and support Alexei Navalny and to actually at times even go against the war.
The Kremlin has denied any state involvement in his death in an Arctic penal colony, where he was often held in isolation. Asked for his assessment of Navalny as a political figure, spokesperson Dmitry Peskov declined to comment, saying only, "Unauthorized gatherings will violate the law, but those who will participate in them will be held accountable in accordance with the current law." Experts say authorities will have surveillance video, and there may be arrests in the days and weeks to come. Police blocked a massive crowd hoping to enter Borisovo Cemetery, where Navalny was laid to rest. Earlier, U.S. Ambassador to Russia Lynn Tracy went to the church to pay her respects, along with the German and French ambassadors to Russia. Navalny's widow, Yulia Navalnaya, and their 2 children were not able to travel to Russia for the funeral, but she turned to social media to say an emotional goodbye. Mary Glantz says she expects Navalnaya to take up the challenge of leading the opposition to Putin's repression.
So I think she's formidable and will present a continuing challenge to the regime as she takes up his mantle and continues his work.
After her husband's death 2 weeks ago, Yulia Navalnaya said, quote, "By killing Alexei, Putin killed half of me, half of my heart and half of my soul. But I still have the other half, and that tells me I have no right to give up."
A cousin and leading opponent of Chad's transitional president Mohamed Idris Deby Itno died in a battle with troops that his party said Thursday was an assassination. Yaya Dilo Jerry, who is 49, had told the AFP amid mounting tensions ahead of his death that people wanted to physically eliminate me before a May 6 presidential election in which he was expected to be the main rival to military junta leader Deby Itno.
Chad's opposition leader Yaya Diop has been killed in a shootout with security forces, according to the country's state prosecutor.
This attack resulted in dozens of injuries and deaths, including the death of Mr. Yaya Diop, president of the PSF, yesterday, 28th of February 2024. 26 people have been arrested and investigations are underway to determine the cause of these unfortunate events.
The leader of the country's socialist PSF party, Diop's death comes a day after intense clashes and violence in the capital. that saw heavy fighting and military presence outside the PSF headquarters and government accusations blaming Diop and his party for deadly attacks on the National Security Agency. Diop had denied any role in the attacks and denounced an attempt to sideline him ahead of the presidential election, where his cousin's name, President Mahamat Déby, is likely to be on the ballot. Earlier this week, Chad's Electoral Commission set an official date for the vote that could return the Central African state to constitutional rule, 3 years after the military seized power, with the first round set for May 6th. Déby, named head of the transition in 2021, had vowed to return to civilian rule within 18 months, but ended up extending the transition period by another 2 years.
U.S. President Joe Biden and his main challenger, Donald Trump, went to opposite ends of the 1,931-kilometer border separating Texas from Mexico on Thursday. Both went to draw attention to the surge of migrants seeking to enter the United States, but their messages were radically different and show how Democrats and Republicans view this key election issue.
One long border, two very different narratives. On Thursday, President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump went to distant corners of the large state of Texas, with Biden in the city of Brownsville in the Rio Grande Valley and Trump further west in Eagle Pass. On one thing, these rivals agree. The recent surge in migrant crossings presents a challenge. In Brownsville, Biden touted an immigration bill that House Republicans are resisting.
Folks, on my first day as president, I introduced a bill I sent to Congress, a comprehensive plan to fix the broken immigration system and to secure the border. But no action was taken. Then months ago, my team began a serious negotiation in a bipartisan group of senators, Democrat-leading conservative Republicans and progressive Democrats. And it resulted in a compromise bill that's the toughest set of border security reforms we've ever seen in this country.
Whereas Trump described the situation as a war and said Biden's policies allowed in thousands of migrants whom he accused of committing crimes.
But this is a Joe Biden invasion. This is a Biden invasion over the past 3 years.
Texas's Republican governor chose to meet not with the sitting president, but with Trump. He vowed to continue with the state's border control measures, which have provoked legal battles with Washington. Political analysts in the Lone Star State say recent polls show immigration is an emerging issue for Democratic Texas voters in the November presidential election.
The border is now creeping up in Democratic voters' minds as an issue that, is increasingly something that needs to be addressed. At the same time, there's not really a clear central position in the Democratic Party on what to do about the border.
In a rare move, Biden reached out to Trump to end his visit on a conciliatory note.
So here's what I would say to Mr. Trump. Instead of playing politics with the issue, instead of telling members of Congress to block this legislation, join me, or I'll join you, in telling the Congress to pass this bipartisan border security bill. We can do it together.
The notion of compromise clashes with Trump's harsh rhetoric.
They look like warriors to me. Something's going on that's bad. Now the United States is being overrun by the Biden migrant crime. It's a new form of vicious violation to our country. It's migrant crime.
But Blank said Trump's notion of migrant crime has no basis in fact, with reputable academic studies showing that even undocumented immigrants commit crimes at lower rates than U.S. citizens.
Donald Trump plays with rhetoric that can be described variously as nativist or in some cases racist. And so tying migration to crime is something that really marries two big issues in the Republican Party, this issue of law and order and this issue of uncontrolled borders, and puts it in a context that is difficult for Democrats to defend, but very, very attractive to most Republican voters.
For the people of Texas, a majority-minority state whose exceptionalist identity is rooted in rugged individualism, this hits close to home.
Donald Trump inched ahead in his quest to become the Republican Party's presidential nominee, winning internal party elections in the states of Missouri, Michigan, and Idaho, U.S. media reported.
Former President Donald Trump is roaring through the Republican primaries, claiming Missouri, Michigan, and Idaho on Saturday. And his topic on repeat is migrant crime and his ideas for a radical migrant policy.
On day one of my administration, I will terminate every open border policy of the Biden administration, and we will begin the largest domestic deportation operation in American history because we have no choice.
According to the Associated Press count, Donald Trump now has 244 delegates on his side, compared to 24 for former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, who is hanging on thanks to the support of donors keen to find an alternative to the former president. Nikki Haley is playing the normal candidate card and calling for a rejection of the Trump-Biden duel.
The majority of Americans think that we're better than this, think we can do better than this, that we deserve to know what normal feels like, that our kids deserve to feel what normal feels like. And all we've seen from Trump and Congress is stagnation and nothing getting done.
Despite dissension within the Republican Party, Trump has won all primaries held so far, revealing his sway amongst his party's voters. He is now, more than ever, favourite to win the Super Tuesday vote, a crucial date when 15 primaries will be held simultaneously.
United States voters in more than a dozen states head to the polls on Tuesday to choose their party's presidential nominee. Over the weekend, all candidates ramped up their criticism of their challengers and spelled out their priorities to voters.
Voters in 15 U.S. states and American Samoa will head to the polls on Tuesday to indicate whom they favor as their party's nominee in the November presidential election. Democratic President Joe Biden and Republican predecessor Donald Trump are each expected to draw closer to securing their party's nomination. Former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, who is trailing Trump for her party's nomination, told NBC's Meet the Press Sunday she'll continue in the race for as long as voters want her to be.
They'll show it in their votes, they'll show it in their donations. My focus is we need to start respecting taxpayer dollars. We need to reduce the size of government. We need to secure our borders and be a country of law and order. And we believe in peace through strength.
Immigration is also among the topics that former President Trump chose to focus on ahead of what is known as Super Tuesday.
Not one more innocent American life should be lost to migrant crime. Got to stop it. You have to get out the vote because we have to send big numbers up for November 5th. We have to let them know that we're a freight train and we're going and we're not stopping.
President Biden, who visited the Texas border last week, accuses Trump of scuttling a bipartisan border security bill. This past Saturday, First Lady Jill Biden shed light on another topic that she argues voters should consider ahead of Super Tuesday: women's reproductive rights.
He's considering a national abortion ban. Donald Trump is dangerous to women and to our families. We simply cannot let him win.
President Biden is all but guaranteed to be his party's nominee. On the Republican side, Trump needs to secure at least 1,215 delegates to officially secure the nomination. It could take several days for all of Tuesday's results to be formally announced.
French police said they had arrested 66 people at a farmers' protest on the Champs-Élysées in central Paris that blocked traffic during the morning rush hour.
Descending on the Champs-Élysées with their tractors, farmers unloaded bales of hay to obstruct one of the French capital's most iconic landmarks. Members of the Rural Coordination Union also laid a wreath in memory of their colleagues who've taken their own lives, saying their protest was an attempt to save French agriculture, rejecting recent concessions from the government.
It's not anger, it's a feeling of betrayal. It's double talk. They say they hurt us, and then we get stabbed in the back with even tougher free trade agreements.
The farmers said their action was peaceful, and some were even seen handing out potatoes to motorists. But dozens were arrested, some forcibly removed by police. Later in the day, another group demonstrated in Versailles.
We don't have anything concrete or structural. We have band-aids and little envelopes of cash. That's not going to move things forward. Agriculture will not improve that way.
The French government has announced more than 400 million euros in emergency measures in response to farmers' protests that began in January. It prompted the sector to call off demonstrations, though they say dialogue needs to continue. Others, though, continue to stage sometimes unruly protests, like at the Paris International Agricultural Fair last weekend. On Friday, the agriculture minister said not everything would be settled by the time the fair ends on Sunday, and that additional pressure through undeclared protests was unnecessary.
The price of petrol in Cuba has risen by a whopping 500% since Friday. The ruling Communist Party says it has introduced this measure as part of a major stabilization plan to get the Cuban economy back on its feet. But after years of facing a deepening economic crisis, Cubans fear that they will not be able to withstand this latest blow.
Snaking queues for petrol have become a regular feature of life in Havana in recent times. And blurry-eyed motorists have become accustomed to spending literally days in line for gasoline.
These lines have become the norm. It's tedious. We spend hours in line to fill up just 40 liters of fuel.
To address a cash crunch, the ruling Communist Party has raised the price of petrol fivefold.
They're importing most of their oil, and so they're importing it at world market prices and selling it very much less. And so that's costing the government. They've got a huge fiscal deficit.
The price hikes are unpopular and have been met with apprehension.
They shouldn't raise prices that much. But what can we do?
Oziel, who has travelled 30 kilometres to wait in line, as there's almost never fuel in his town's petrol station, is the only motorist we found in favour of the price rises.
There's no fuel where I live, so I have to come to buy it here. I'm not too bothered about the price rise. What I want is to be able to arrive at a petrol station and fill up without waiting in line.
Today's price rises substantially reduce fuel subsidies. Until this month, a litre of petrol here in Cuba cost just 12 cents of US dollar, cheaper than almost any other country in the world. But even these prices were expensive for Cubans who've seen their tiny salaries crushed by inflation in recent years. In the short term, the move will spur inflation. And on an island where the average salary has dropped to the equivalent of just $16 a month, people are worried. This week it was revealed that the Cuban government has asked the UN World Food Programme to help it get milk to children on the island. With malnutrition increasing, these price rises touch a nerve.
For students with a disability, career options can appear limited, but in Ghana, one journalist is using photojournalism to encourage students at a deaf school to broaden their horizons.
At 17 years old, Job Nimbi has never spoken a word. Born with speech and hearing disabilities, Nimbi and others at this Ghana school instead found their voices through photography. Nimbi says he is happy to share his life journey with the world through photos, and he wants to inspire others who live with disabilities. But Nimbi and his peers face significant challenges, including discrimination. Other hurdles are limited training and resources. Ghana's Statistical Service estimates only a fraction of the children with a hearing disability are able to pursue a higher education. Yet, Nimbi remains resolute.
Now, what I'm learning and focusing on is to become a doctor.
Photography was introduced to the Savalugu School for the Deaf by Geoffrey Buta. The award-winning photojournalist is on a campaign to amplify marginalized voices through visual storytelling. His project, Photo for Change, has one focus.
Train people, assist people to tell their own story in the community they find themselves, and as well as using photography or visuals to address societal issues.
Buta's Photo Club offers classes on photojournalism. In less than a year, students can take professional quality pictures by themselves and write captions.
So with the power of photography, they can tell stories around them. They can become visual journalists in the future. They can become broadcasters.
The teachers also benefit, with the club providing easy access to visual learning materials.
You have seen a picture somewhere that has connection with what you are going to deliver, the lesson you're going to deliver. And so you use the camera to take that photo, bring it to the class, and then show it to the children. Then you can develop your lesson from there.
Buta plans to expand his project to 10 more schools in Ghana and create exhibitions to showcase students' work. Other plans include setting up internship with media outlets. And in the long term, he wants to inspire a generation of students with disabilities to become award-winning photojournalists.
Tingawule qhamuka phandle kwakuleli sitawuba hlola emakethe sitawubuya sicocisane naFabrice ngetemidlalo.
Kude lesinye isikhathi ngaphandle kwalesi
aba-researche bafunde.
Being risky means ukuthi nalokuwa kwayo kulula.
Nathi kufuna sente ukukhicita lokhu kusembili.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you for this opportunity to brief the Council on the current food security crisis in Gaza, together with my colleagues from OCHA and FAO. As you have already heard, the Famine Review Committee has warned of a real prospect of famine by May, with over 500,000 people at risk if that threat is allowed to materialize. Even before October, 2/3 of the people in Gaza were supported with food assistance. Today, food aid is required by almost the entire population of 2.2 million people. Gaza is seeing the worst level of child malnutrition anywhere in the world. 1 child in every 6 under the age of 2 is acutely malnourished. The World Food Programme is ready to swiftly expand and scale up our operations if there is a ceasefire agreement. But in the meantime, the risk of famine is being fueled by the inability to bring critical food supplies into Gaza in sufficient quantities, and the almost impossible operating conditions faced by our staff on the ground. Conditions in northern Gaza are particularly dire. On Sunday, February 18, we resumed deliveries to the north for the first time in 3 weeks. Our intention was to send 10 trucks per day for 7 days to address immediate needs and provide some reassurance to people living there that sufficient food would be brought in. However, on both February 18 and 19, our convoys faced significant obstacles. There were delays at checkpoints, they faced gunfire and other violence, food was looted along the way, and at their destination, they were overwhelmed by desperately hungry people. As a result, we've been forced to pause deliveries of food to the north until conditions are in place that allow for safe distributions, both for our staff and for the people receiving our assistance. This is not a decision WFP has taken lightly, as we know it means conditions will worsen, and more people will be at risk of dying from hunger-related causes. But the breakdown in civil order, driven by sheer desperation, is preventing the safe distribution of aid. We are now urgently exploring all viable delivery options to allow the resumption of operations in northern Gaza as soon as possible. This is an absolute humanitarian imperative. The staff on our convoys witnessed catastrophic conditions in the north. Food and clean water are scarce, malnutrition is soaring, and disease is rife. Madam President, immediate action is required to enable a huge increase in the volume of food and other humanitarian supplies going into northern Gaza. This is the only way to calm tension and restore some semblance of civil order. For this to happen, we need a functioning operating environment. We need the port of Ashdod and the Carney crossing to open so we can import food and other essential supplies swiftly and at scale. And we need a working humanitarian notification system and a stable communications network to keep humanitarian staff safe. If nothing changes, a famine is imminent in northern Gaza. We must all double down and live up to our responsibilities to ensure it does not happen on our watch. Meanwhile, in the south of Gaza, WFP and partners are on the ground delivering food as it comes to shelters, to makeshift camps, and to shops. But we're unable to provide regular or sufficient food to people who badly need it. Most food is distributed in Rafah, the hub of WFP's current operations in Gaza, and very little assistance reaches people elsewhere. WFP has made efforts to support the re-establishment of local food systems wherever possible. This has included expanding distribution points to include local shops, supporting bakeries by providing them the wheat flour and other necessary resources to operate, and supplying community-run kitchens that provide hot meals every day. But the fact remains that without safe and greatly expanded access, aid workers cannot mount a relief operations at the scale required to reverse the severe humanitarian crisis now gripping Gaza. It is essential we avert a famine, and this requires much more than just food supplies. Basic services must also be restored, including health services, electricity networks, and water and sanitation pipelines. In this, UNRWA is indispensable. Council members, in 2018, this body adopted Security Council Resolution 2417, which reaffirms international humanitarian law and the need to break the vicious cycle between armed conflict and food insecurity. Today, we call on the Council to uphold its commitments under that resolution. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank
Ujala masada mahlok nathi lesa.
Sabatandi ukuthi njengalokhu sivile sive sithi khulumeni.
Give the floor to Mr. Martin Griffiths.
Thank you very much, Madam President, and thank you for inviting me to speak here. This month marks 1 year, as Ger has been saying, since the catastrophic earthquakes that struck Turkey as well as Syria on February the 6th, I think it was, 2023, at 4 o'clock in the morning. At a time that none of us will easily forget. And as we reflect on the first anniversary of this tragedy, our hearts go out to families across the region, both these countries, who have endured such profound loss, and in some cases, of course, continue to do so. The earthquakes, among the most severe in a century, wrought untold devastation. I remember it well. Claimed thousands of lives and left millions of people in both countries injured, traumatized in particular, as I remember, and homeless. And with the remarkable support of the international community, crucial emergency relief was provided, including first aid, food and protection assistance, and shelter support. But in Syria, where the conflict, as Ger has been saying, is about to hit the 13-year mark, it is clear that much more is still needed to address the long-term humanitarian impact of the earthquakes, which includes ensuring restoration of services, early recovery, provision of basic services, provision of adequate shelter still for those suffering from that awful morning, and particularly for displaced pregnant women and girls. And the same goes for the wider humanitarian crisis in Syria. It's not just the earthquake zones which suffer and need our help. Already one of the most severe crises in the world a year ago, as Ger has just said, it has only deteriorated over the last 7 months. Just when you think it couldn't get any worse, it does get more and more problematic, despite the best efforts of the government of Syria. The same goes for the wider humanitarian crisis in Syria, and we need to focus on it, both through Ger's fundamental leadership and through whatever support we can give. In 2024, therefore, Syria's humanitarian outlook remains bleak. A staggering 16.7 million people now require humanitarian assistance, nearly 3/4 of the population, and the highest number of people in need since the start of the crisis, those 13 years ago. Expanding hostilities in the north of Syria and recent attacks in Damascus, Ger has been speaking to this, and in rural Damascus and Homs governorates, continue to cause civilian casualties, displacement, and extensive damage. I was reminded when looking at some of those terrible scenes of desecration and desolation in Gaza, I was reminded of some of those early years in Homs, in the early years of the Syrian conflict, where we saw similar destroyed buildings and streets empty of people. The reduction in services in electricity, water, and cooking fuel has exacerbated food insecurity and malnutrition, particularly among vulnerable members of society. Across Syria, the ongoing hostilities, the decline in essential services, prolonged water shortages, and a dire economic situation are all serving to increase people's reliance on sparse and scarce humanitarian aid. Access challenges, including daily security incidents, are constraining our ability to safely deliver essential assistance and to directly engage with affected populations. So, of course, as always, I reiterate my call to all parties involved to respect international humanitarian law, take constant care to spare civilians and civilian infrastructure. And it includes allowing and facilitating the rapid and unimpeded passage of humanitarian relief to people in need, including across the lines. Madam President, I welcome the decision by the government of Syria earlier this month, thank you, to renew its permission for the UN to use the Bab al-Salam and Al-Rai crossings to deliver humanitarian assistance for an additional 3 months until the 13th of May 2024. We all hope for longer, but we're still alive and we're still delivering through those crossings. Thank you for that. I want to take this opportunity to welcome our friend back from Damascus, where we used to meet often, and to see you back here where you belong. And I hope we will work closely together, Ambassador. The extension announced by you, indeed, follows an earlier equally welcome decision by the Syrian Arab Republic in January to extend its permission for the use of Bab al-Hawa crossing to deliver assistance into northwest Syria for an additional 6 months until July 2024. In 2023, the UN and its humanitarian partners moved more than 5,000 trucks carrying essential aid through these crossings. Already in 2024, we have carried out more than 40 cross-border missions. This has allowed us to provide essential aid to 2.5 million people every month and to administer over 1 million medical procedures. We continue to advocate for humanitarians to be afforded the space needed to decide on the quickest, most efficient way to deliver assistance to those who desperately need it. It's evident that cross-border assistance will continue to be needed and to be crucial for people until the peace that Gair has spoken of visits Syria. It's also clear, and I want to be very clear about this, that the expansion of cross-line deliveries, expansion is a nice word to use in this context, the initiation of cross-line deliveries must be pursued with vigor, including to the northwest. It is a humanitarian imperative and a matter on which we are constantly engaged. The humanitarian community, Madam President, remains committed to providing the assistance that people need across Syria. We cannot do so unless we have the required funding. We thank everyone in this room who's been so generous in the past. The humanitarian response plan last year, however, received less than 40% of the required funding, the worst funded response plan since the start of the conflict. The earthquakes of February 2023, as devastating as they were, could have been the moment when we said to ourselves and to all around us, the people of Syria have suffered enough. Let's put an end to this. However, the international attention, generous mobilization of resources, and solidarity, indeed, particularly from the region, behind the response, unfortunately proved momentary. 1 year on, the people of Syria are facing a worse humanitarian situation than before that day. And as international attention wanes and, of course, is taken up by other conflicts, the suffering and despair of the people of Syria is intensifying. The horizon, a future, a hope, a desperate hope for their children's future, it's difficult to sustain. But we must not allow ourselves to become resigned to this. We must continue to urge respect, as I did, for international humanitarian law, and we must see an increase in levels of funding for the humanitarian response. And indeed, the humanitarian response to the earthquake, the flash appeal, you remember that we put out right about a week after the earthquakes, was fully funded in Syria. I think it was fully funded in Turkey. So we know that the generosity of the international community exists. We must hope this year to see it happen again, and we look again, as we said when we were in the last time we met, we look to Gair for his leadership, and we fully support all his priorities. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Mr. Griffiths for his briefing.
7 minutes after 7, welcome back to the program. Fabrice, welcome to the program.
Yeah.
The MTN Premier League was very interesting. On Friday, we did a fun game with this predictor with some lock standings at our Emeganjani on Monday. After the games, of course, weekend. I think the biggest prediction that we both agreed on was Young Buffaloes will still be on the top, and indeed, they are still at the top. They had a great weekend. Bafana Swallows also had a great weekend. But what is happening with Royal Leopards?
I think more than anything, like we talked about on Friday, is that for them not playing that game against Sundowns, which we know is going to be played on Thursday, the 7th of March, and then it changes the entire race of the title. We look at the table, but when you look at where now they are, their number for Swallows won, Green Mamba won 5 goals, Young Buffaloes. So now the amount of goals that were scored by all the teams really pushed him to the 4th position. They have to come out on Thursday and win that game against
They need it.
Yeah, they need to, because if they don't, then the race is taking another twist, and that's anyone's course. Anyone is ready at this point in time to take it. So for me, like I've said, people should really be careful of Young Buffaloes, the way they are moving, the way they are doing things.
Green Mamba really needed this win, Fabrice. I mean, scoring 5 goals, of course, was sending a message that we are back, but they definitely and desperately needed this win. 34 points, just 1 point behind Young Buffaloes. They're still in the race.
They're still in the race. So, and I think even Leopard, in as much as they haven't played their game, which I think if once they play, then we're going to have to talk about where they can be. But if they win that game, then they're back on top of the log. So 36 points if they win the game. Then you look at Denver Sundowns also, they need to fight for their lives. So they need to make sure that they don't get defeated in that game. But anyone from number 1, number 4, you drop a point, you draw, you lose, and then the position change. But I would say, but I think Friday when we left, I said a draw for Pirates and Singzini, we moved them up into 13th position. And I think for the first time in more than 18 months, Moroni Pirates have moved from the bottom of the table above the other position. So I think if they can keep up the good work, I mean, there is only 7 games left in the season, so I think they are capable. Wanderers, they are capable. Anyone is capable. Number 11, number 12, number 13, they are all capable of changing the story. But I think from what I've seen, Zulu United will be relegated, in my opinion. Not that I'm saying calculations, in my opinion. But anyone from number 11 to number 14 can go down.
Yeah, and Zulu United hasn't seen a win in I don't know how many games.
Yeah.
And it's quite sad.
That draw, Singers in Hospitals against Moroni Pirates, we talked about Spurs being at home and everything, but that draw really, really helped Pirates because...
But Moroni Pirates will have to start winning games.
Yeah, they have to start winning games. You know, the funny thing, Swiss, is that they don't really play bad football. They play very good football, but they are not that much lucky. So I think not scoring... Not
they have one of my favorite players in the league, that number 2, that short guy. That's one of my favorite players in the league. But it just doesn't translate to wins. I don't know.
To where they are today, yeah. But I think teams that are safe in terms of where they are, I think for Highlanders and Singers in Ilo, for Madlenya, Seabirds, then they can say for them, you know, nothing can happen to them in terms of the fight for the title. But then one thing that I need to highlight before maybe we change the story, so Buffaloes have also another challenge, because if you look at their games, at some point they face Highlander, at some point they play, Leopard, if I'm not mistaken, yes. So anything can change. That means Leopard also have a challenge. Swallows, they have played Green Mamba, they drew 0-0, so that is off the mark. But from Babane Swallows, they still have the derby coming this weekend. They're playing Babane Highlanders, you know, in terms of the Ingwenyama Cup. Remember the above weekend, but even this weekend they should be playing. So then you change, you have to look at how this story will change in the remaining 7 games. Anything is possible between number 1 and number 4. Like I said, so I think for the past 10 years, I've never seen a league that is that competitive than this one.
Fabrice, Arsenal is going to play an important game tonight,
at
10 p.m., a very, very important game. Just, to try and still be up there. In fact, if they win this game...
they move back to the same position in terms of closing the gap between number 1 and number 2.
And they'll just be 1 point behind number 2, which is Manchester City, who had a great weekend, by the way, beating Manchester United, but also Liverpool, a very, very important win over the weekend.
I was spot on in terms of, I was nearly spot on because, remember I said for Manchester, it's a derby, both teams to score, and both teams scored. I knew the derby has something to offer, but I think where I was really, really frustrated, Liverpool, Nottingham Forest. Liverpool getting that goal in the dying moments. Not even the dying moments. It's the last
almost
second.
Got it there.
Yeah, so that draw is going to change anything. I heard Forest was actually appealing to saying that there wasn't a situation, there might have been an offside or handball, but apparently they were appealing. So we hear how it goes, but I don't think they will deduct the points. Liverpool has already got the 3 points. But the game was this. This young man just changed the story yesterday. Phil Foden, beating Manchester United 3-1. He scored the 2 goals. And I think it's a statement. I said this on Friday. Look at Aston Villa. They're also back into winning ways. You've got Tottenham back to winning ways. Then it changes the story because Manchester United cannot catch up with these 2 teams. They have really improved. Chelsea is drawing against Brentford. Like I said, Fiso, what I think that will change. Manchester City, if they win their next 5 to 6 games, then I can confirm. Because their next game is against Liverpool. Then from Liverpool, they go to Brighton. Then Brighton, they go to Arsenal. Then Arsenal, they go to Chelsea. So if they win their next 5 games, then they have convinced me that Pep, once again, it's your year, take the title. But having won the Manchester Derby yesterday, they go to the Super Sunday this weekend against Liverpool. Anything is possible. Anything at this point in time. And a draw between the two sides will assist Arsenal if they are maybe to get 3 points again this coming weekend.
Not so much. Yes, they will assist Arsenal, but
Yeah.
we have to remember after Manchester City plays Liverpool, they'll play Brighton, and then they'll play Arsenal.
Arsenal, yes.
So
anything is possible. And then I think record-wise, Brighton has been a team that normally gives them a hard time, so anything can happen. But I think number 1, number 3, anything is yet to change. But Arsenal have to win their game tonight against Sheffield United.
And how difficult is that game for Arsenal tonight?
It is difficult. They're away. They're away to Sheffield, and I'm hoping that maybe the pressure. When you go to a game like this, Fisto, when the teams that you're competing with in the title race, they both have won. Liverpool won, City won. So they know that the pressure will be on them. Yes, look at where Sheffield United is.
That's
number
story,
20.
Yeah, I was about to ask
but that's the funny and the tricky part about the English Premiership. Look at Luton. They drew against Chelsea.
You're right.
Luton, yes. So you have to understand that anything at this point in time, Sheffield United can be at home, but they can come and change the story. Like I said on Friday, it's a team with the Champions League, so you can't undermine them.
The last win they got was against Luton Town.
Yeah. But what a weekend it was indeed. It was just a beautiful weekend in terms of goals and the reaction. So tonight, Arsenal, they get 3 points, they close the gap. Then we are waiting for the big weekend when Liverpool take on Manchester City.
Yeah. The La Liga also had some interesting results this weekend. Of course, my Barcelona is still letting me down, but Real Madrid secured a very important win. I think that was one of the games that we discussed, Fabrice, and said Real Madrid really wants to win this game. But here are the results.
Yeah, the results. I think for them a draw wasn't really that bad, because you have also to look at number 2, Girona. They dropped points against Real Mallorca. So the title race, it's quite on hold. But then you have to be very careful, because you have a team like Barcelona. They're watching from a distance to say, in as much as we can also get 3 points, but a draw also will push us to come closer. Look how tight it is now. Girona, if they're not careful, I think Barcelona at some point will overtake them, because that's defeat. Yeah.
I look at the points difference, Fabrice. Do you really think Barcelona could overtake Girona?
Yeah, it's a point. It's a point different. Okay, number 1, number 2, it's 7 points. But number 2 and number 3, it's just a point. And funny enough, Atletico Madrid is not out of it, because between number 2 and number 4, it's just 4 points. So I think Barcelona...
So can we agree that Girona and Barcelona and Atletico Madrid they are racing for the second position?
Yeah, they're racing for the second position. Yes, I agree. But I'm talking about what we had said prior, that Girona could maintain that position. The story will change, because they still have to go visit Barcelona at the new camp, so anything is possible. These are some of the results. Valencia against Real Madrid, and I think it was a game to watch. Mallorca defeating Girona on home soil. Girona, it was quite disappointing. But I think this is the team that is picking up points. Atletico Madrid against their game against Real Betis. It was also a statement to say we're in to maintain the top 2 or top 3. So the season now, remember now Champions League is back also, so we'll have some teams not really showing you the full focus, especially the so-called big teams in Spain, in England, in Italy, and in France and in Portugal. So all these teams have got a huge busy schedule, and we've got also last FIFA week this month. So there will be a little bit of burnout.
FA Cup.
Yeah, there's FA Cup. There's a little bit of burnout in terms of the players.
Yes, quite interesting.
Yeah.
But we are agreeing that Real Madrid has won the La Liga. So
they're not ready to say they have won the La Liga, because mathematically,
who's their potential threat? Girona, Barcelona.
Barcelona. They could maybe put it, but I'm not saying the story will change.
It's not.
85% they have taken the league, but anything can happen. This is football. So
when are they acquiring Mbappe again?
It's the end of the season, so he's leaving PSG, and by the beginning of next season, 2024-2025 season, he's going to be a Madrid player.
And do you see him being the best player in Madrid?
I think I was actually looking at how they might line up. If you have him, which means now they have to use him as a first number 1, because I don't see him coming from the wing, because you've got Vinicius and the other side.
Who is my favorite player in Madrid, by the way?
Your favorite player is Vinicius.
In Madrid?
Yes.
Yeah.
But for me, it's Bellingham. I think what he's done. The young man is only 21. Bellingham, aye. You've got Kamavinga. These are young men, they are doing the job. But I think it's a youth squad. They are all working. You look at Bellingham, 21, Vinicius, 22 or 23. Mbappe is joining them. Mbappe should be 24, 25. But that's the peak. That's the age where you need to start winning Ballon d'Or and stuff. Then you've got Kamavinga, 21. You've got, these are huge. I think the experienced players are within the defenders, where you have Bo, Alaba, and Rudiger. These are the players who are above 25, 26. But going forward, what is quite interesting, they're all under 25.
These are some of the things that I feel like sometimes should be regulated, because now, as you're speaking, Real Madrid to me sounds like a classic 11 or World 11 from PlayStation. They're just too strong. And one asks themselves, how will they beat this team going forward?
There's still a debate to say, if Mbappe comes, which number does he wear? Give him number 9, because you cannot rip off Vinicius the same number. But what a season is going to be in Spain.
It's going to be a great season indeed, and we'll talk about it on Friday again. Fabrice, thank you for joining us.
The day you take Christ into your life, you begin to walk in a blessing.
Emaswati Master ushiya simakazi sibukela abanye bonkulunkulu uNkulunkulu utawukhwesha kithi emaswati singamlahli uNkulunkulu
sitomdumisa sisho sithi uyigcwele somali
mase ubutholile lobungcwele hlala ungilongcwele
ningesabi nimaswati. This is our season. Nguye idolo, nguye namhla, nguye nakusasa.
Lo hlelo lothi siyakudumisa ngempela sesingenile kulolu hlelo insamba mali enhle mbukelo ehlelo siyakudumisa ngwemukele kulolu hlelo bengithembisile ukuthi evikini eliphelile ukuthi nalamhla sithabe sichubeka silapha itulo emphakathini evusweni sithi phetha khona ke inkozo namhlanje nehlelo sithabe sinayo umfundisi Madudu Mabuza asipha lona live laNkulunkulu akhuluma ngebumgcoka bekubonga bomgcoka bekuthandaza ubonge kuye uNkulunkulu kanti ngethemba sitawubuseka sisekhona khona itulo emphakathini evusweni.
Umasibuka emuva siyamangala simakathe welisulu besibobanithile uthi usinake wena umenathi wase wabala wangavumi kutsi siphelele ehlane